Segment 1: The Fire That Spoke in Whispers. It began, as most hauntings do, with a whisper no one else heard. The people of Blackthorn Hollow called her the Ember Child. Elara Blackthorne, Ellie to those who dared get close, was the last of her family still living in the manor on the hill. Every other window in the village had been boarded up since the fire of '66. 2/3 of the houses were shells, roofs caved in, walls blackened, chimneys like broken teeth. When the wind came from the moors, it carried soot that never settled. Lady Morwenna Blackthorne, her grandmother, still called it a sacred place. She spoke of the warmth, a holy flame that purified. To Ellie, it was simply what made the nights glow orange through the cracks in the shutters. At 9 years old, she had already learned not to ask about St. Hallow's School for Girls, even though its ruins sat within sight of her attic window. Every evening, she saw the scorched bell tower leaning in silhouette, and heard the faint metallic sound that could have been the wind, or someone tapping from underneath. The first time Ellie disobeyed her grandmother, it was to find that sound. It was a Saturday, thick fog crawling up from the valley, muffling the sheep and the bells and the church itself. She crossed the overgrown garden, careful not to wake Morwenna's hounds, and climbed the fence that divided the manor from the school's burned ground. Her shoes sank into ash. The air smelled like wet iron. Inside, the ruin was half stone, half skeleton. Beams sagged, and soot painted the air with invisible fingerprints. The floor of the old boiler room was cracked open down the middle, like something underneath had tried to push its way out. That was where she saw it, carved into the blackened tile, a sigil in the shape of a coiled dragon made of flame. The grooves were filled with dried, flaking red. She reached out and touched it. The sound came again, not from the walls, but from beneath her hand. A low hum, like a voice learning to breathe. Warmth is mercy. Ash is memory. The voice was neither male nor female. It was a heat pressed against her skull, soft and vast. When she returned home, her hands were still smudged with soot. Lady Morwenna noticed immediately. Her grandmother's study smelled of burnt sage and silver polish. Relics hung from the ceiling, brass pendulums, dried herbs, and tiny bottles filled with candle wax and bone dust. "What did you touch?" Morwenna asked. Ellie hesitated. "Just the floor. At St. Hallow's." The silver cane struck her back so fast she didn't even cry until afterward. Morwenna knelt, her eyes sharp and bright. "You will not set foot in that place again, do you understand?" Ellie's voice trembled. "Why?" The old woman sighed, lowering her hand. "Because you are not ready to meet what sleeps there." That night, Ellie dreamed of 3 girls chained to iron posts, their hair floating like smoke, singing a word she could not understand. When she woke, her palms were blistered. Over the next weeks, Morwenna began her lessons in the warmth. "Fire is harmony," she said. "It destroys only what refuses to change." Ellie would sit before the hearth while Morwenna recited from her crimson-bound psalms. She spoke of 2 forces, the warmth, who gave light and peace, and the ashen, the dragon of chaos who devoured creation when worship turned to pride. When Ellie asked if the dragon was real, Morwenna smiled faintly. "Real enough to burn a school," she said. Ellie didn't know then that her grandmother's smile was the worst part. Late one night, a storm cracked open the sky. The roof groaned, rain hissed through the broken chimney. Ellie couldn't sleep. She lit her candle and crept down the hallway, following the draft toward her grandmother's locked room. Inside, the air was hot, too hot. She pushed the door an inch open and saw Morwenna kneeling before a small iron brazier, murmuring to something that glowed within. A book lay open beside her, its cover the color of smoke, its lock made from a small piece of ivory that looked too much like bone. Morwenna's hand trembled as she poured something into the fire. The flames turned green. For a moment, a shape coiled within them, scales of ash, eyes like molten glass. One day, the old woman whispered, "You will return to me, my lord. The warmth must be fed." The heat pressed against Ellie's face, and for a heartbeat she saw a shadow turn its head toward her. She ran before it could see more. The next morning, she found the brazier cold and empty, the book gone. But Morwenna's cane was leaning against the doorframe, and her voice was calm at breakfast, as if nothing had happened. Ellie kept silent. The secret burned under her skin like fever. Days later, she found the book again, hidden behind a false panel in the library. The spine was engraved with a symbol she recognized, the coiled dragon. When she opened it, the smell of charcoal and old skin filled the air. The pages were grey, the writing carved rather than inked. The first words she read were, "3 souls bound in fire, 3 hearts offered to the ashen." The book listed names, each marked with a cross of blood that had long since dried. At the end was a space left blank, as if waiting. A line followed beneath, "The next bearer must light the hollow flame." That night, she brought the book to the old boiler room again. Rain had stopped, the moon hung red through the mist. The symbol on the floor pulsed faintly, as she laid the book upon it. In the corner of the ruin, 2 fireflies hovered inside a cracked glass jar, trapped there since the summer, still alive. Their glow flickered as if afraid. She whispered, "Don't worry. I won't hurt you." Then she opened the grimoire, and read the first invocation. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the air thickened. The dragon symbol flared, briefly alive, and the jar shook on its base. A spark leapt from the circle and landed on her wrist. It didn't burn, it branded. A small sigil now lived under her skin, glowing faintly in time with her pulse. The next morning, Morwenna's voice was brittle with fear. "What did you do?" Ellie lied, but the mark betrayed her. Morwenna's face paled. "You don't understand, child. That mark isn't the warmth. It's the ashen. It was meant for me, not you." She struck the hearth with her cane, scattering embers. "You've woken something that sleeps in blood and smoke. It remembers the girls. It remembers the bargain I broke." Ellie's voice shook. "Then teach me how to stop it." Her grandmother looked at her for a long, weary moment. "You can't stop a god. You can only feed it something else." That night, lightning hit the moors again. The sky burned red, and for an instant, St. Hallow seemed whole in the reflection on the windows, its bell tower rising, its flames pure and bright. Ellie thought she heard laughter in the thunder, high and thin, like girls' voices carried through smoke. When she turned from the window, her grandmother stood behind her, face ghost pale in the firelight. "You were born to finish what I began," Morwenna said softly. "That's what blood is for." And outside, under the ashfall sky, the sigil on Ellie's wrist began to shine through her skin. Segment 2: The Furnace Prison. There is a point when heat becomes silence, when the air no longer moves, and even breathing feels like swallowing cinders. That was the air inside Blackthorn Manor the night it burned. Ellie didn't remember striking the match. She only remembered the smell. Her grandmother's bed was already a pyre. The sheets had gone first, then the curtains, their silk twisting into black ribbons. Lady Morwenna lay still amid the flames, eyes open, her face strangely calm. The fire whispered, "Not yet enough." Ellie ran until the sky turned silver, her lungs raw from smoke. Behind her, the manor collapsed in its own reflection, embers spiraling upward like stars that had forgotten the sky. By dawn, she was the only living Blackthorn left. She made her new home beneath St. Hallow's. The ruins boiler room had once heated the entire school. Now it was her refuge, its walls layered with ash so thick it muffled sound. She called it the furnace, though no fire had burned there in decades. The sigil on her wrist glowed faintly whenever she approached the old iron grate in the center. The grate covered a pit that went deep enough for echoes to come back distorted, as if something spoke from the other side. She brought few things with her. The grimoire bound in grey hide, the jar containing her 2 fireflies, glow and ember, and a rusted pocket knife she'd found in Reggie Ashford's shed years ago. She'd met him only once, the old fire inspector, who had come after the 1966 blaze. He'd told her she had her grandmother's eyes. When she'd asked about the fire, he'd simply said, "Some things keep burning whether you see them or not." Now, she understood. The days blurred. Time in the furnace did not behave. Morning came as a dim bloom of light through cracks in the ceiling, night arrived without sound. Ellie stopped counting after the 13th sunrise. Her leg had begun to rot where the snake bit her. The flesh around the wound darkened, pulsing with fever. She wrapped it in old bandages from the school's infirmary, and whispered to her fireflies for company. "You're lucky," she said to the jar. "You still glow." The insects flickered in response, small pulses of living light that made the grimoire's sigil dance on the wall. She took it as a sign, approval, or instruction. On the 14th night, she opened the book again. The pages no longer read like text but like breathing. Symbols crawled across the parchment, rearranging themselves into words she hadn't learned. Blood remembers its flame. Bone remembers its shape. She knew then what it wanted. She used the knife carefully, cutting a shallow line across her palm. Her blood hissed when it touched the cold stone floor. The air trembled, the fireflies went still. She drew the coiled dragon symbol again, this time smaller, neater, across the surface of the grimoire's cover. The wound sealed itself faster than it should have. The mark on her wrist pulsed in rhythm, brighter, warmer. For the first time, she didn't feel cold. Weeks passed. The storm above the moors never stopped. Every time thunder rolled, the boiler's pipes shook faintly, like veins full of heartbeat. Ellie built a small nest in the corner from old blankets and debris. She spoke aloud to the air, to her grandmother, to the unseen thing beneath the grate. "I know you," she whispered. "You're what she tried to control." The furnace answered with warmth. It started as a soft exhale, a current of heat rising through the vent. Then came a voice that wasn't quite a voice, a vibration through the metal. "I remember the girl. The one who burned." Ellie froze. Beatrice. The name came unbidden, from the grimoire, from the story she'd read of the girls who died in the sacrifice. "We burned so she could live," the voice said. "But fire eats promises." The pit beneath the grate flickered red. Ellie clutched the jar of fireflies against her chest. "If I give you back what you lost," she whispered, "will you let me see her?" "Yes." "Burn what binds you." The fever worsened. Her leg festered, each step sent shocks of pain through her bones. Yet she refused to leave. She believed that every hour of suffering was payment toward revelation. She carved symbols into the wall with the knife, tracing the lines that appeared in her dreams. She mixed her blood with soot to darken them. The walls grew warm to the touch. Sometimes, when she fell asleep, she felt fingers brushing her hair, gentle, childlike. Once, she woke to find 3 faint handprints on the inside of the furnace door, small as her own. "You're close," the voice murmured. "We need air. We need bone." Ellie smiled through her fever. "Then I'll dig." One night, she dragged herself up the steps to the ruins above. The fog outside was so dense it glowed white. Her breath came in small, wet gasps. In the rubble of the old library, she found an iron spade, half-rusted. "Not much longer," she told the fireflies. They pulsed dimly in the jar. She began digging near the edge of the schoolyard where the grass refused to grow. The soil was black, saturated with ancient charcoal. Every thrust of the spade released a faint warmth, as though the earth itself still smoldered beneath. By dawn, she hit stone. It wasn't a coffin, at least not one she recognized. More like a vault, its lid etched with the same dragon spiral she'd seen before. Her hands shook as she pried it open. Inside lay a bundle of white ash, shaped roughly like a child curled in sleep. A small silver locket rested beside it, the initials BA engraved upon the clasp. Beatrice Ashford. Ellie lifted the locket. It was still warm. The ground around her whispered, "Feed the flame." Back in the furnace, she arranged the remains upon the floor, ashes, locket, and the grimoire. The heat radiating from the grate made her dizzy. Her wound had reopened, the flesh around her ankle was dark and cracked like burnt wood. When she touched it, flakes of soot came away with her skin. "You're becoming what you were meant to," the voice crooned. She laughed softly, deliriously. "Then finish it." The dragon mark flared, and the air thickened. Shadows coiled in the corners like smoke finding form. "You will need blood. You will need fire. And you will need her name." "Beatrice Ashford," Ellie whispered. The air trembled. The grimoire's pages turned themselves, stopping at a passage she hadn't seen before. "When ash and flesh mingle, the gate will open." She didn't sleep that night. She couldn't. Her thoughts pulsed with heat and rhythm. The fireflies hovered restlessly in their jar. Their light dimmed, then steadied, obedient, waiting. She placed the jar at the center of the sigil. "Glow, ember, stay with me." Then she took the knife again, and drew a circle on the floor with her own blood, encircling the jar and the ashes. The voice hummed through her bones, a song both terrible and tender. "Now, child of the cinders, write your name in flame." She traced her initials with the blade's point on the floorboards, then smeared the marks with blood until they formed a spiral. Heat blossomed upward, sweet and violent. The circle burned silently, the flames pale as bone. The fireflies burst from their jar, not dying, but transforming, their light becoming threads of molten gold that wove themselves into the air. The ash rose, swirling. And Beatrice Ashford's whisper answered through the smoke. "I remember the heat." When dawn came, Ellie was still kneeling in the circle, eyes glazed, hair stiff with soot. The furnace was quiet again, but the air smelled of roses and char. Her wrist mark had changed shape. No longer the coiled dragon, but an open eye wreathed in smoke. She knew, without question, that the Ashen had seen her, and approved. From somewhere far above, she heard distant thunder. But to Ellie, it sounded like laughter. The kind that comes from fire finding its voice. Segment 3: The Ashen Awakens. By the time the moors turned red with autumn, Blackthorn Hollow had forgotten sunlight. Every morning the fog rolled low and thick, and by dusk it gleamed like blood beneath the horizon. Ellie had stopped counting the days. She barely ate, barely slept. The fever had become her companion, the voice her guide. Her reflection no longer matched her face, her skin was pale ash-grey, her veins faintly glowing where the mark pulsed on her wrist. Each night the furnace whispered, "Soon." And each morning, she woke with soot beneath her fingernails, as though she had already begun digging. The ritual demanded a grave. Ellie knew where to go before the voice told her. The Ashford Cemetery lay at the edge of the moors, its gates rusted and sharp, its stones choked with ivy. The bicycle she found in the ruins of the village had one working wheel, and a frame the color of dried blood. She rode it anyway, her hair streaming in the wind like smoke. It was twilight, the kind of light that turns every shadow red. The voice hummed through her chest. "Dig where the girl sleeps. Break the silence. Unbind the flame." She dismounted, the spade still tied to her back, and stepped into the graveyard. The stone she sought was cracked nearly in half. Beatrice Ashford, 1953 to 1966. Someone had left a ribbon there once, but time had bleached it grey. Ellie touched the name. The mark on her wrist burned hotter. "Do you hear her?" "Yes." The wind gusted. Somewhere a church bell rang 9 times. The moors hissed, the grass whispering like tongues. She began to dig. The earth was soft with rot. Every thrust of the spade released the smell of smoke, as though the ground itself remembered fire. Her muscles screamed, her vision blurred. After the 7th foot, the blade struck something hollow. Wood, or what was left of it. The coffin had collapsed inward, the lid blackened from the old fire. Inside lay bones small and fragile as twigs. But what froze her breath was the head, still intact, golden hair curled like ribbons of flame. Ellie gagged, falling to her knees. The smell was sweet and vile, thick as tar. "Beatrice," she whispered, voice shaking. "You were the first. Finish it." She took the locket from her pocket, the one engraved with BA, and placed it on the skull's forehead. Then she drew the knife. Her hands trembled only once. She cut her palm open, deep this time, blood flowing thick and dark. It hissed where it fell upon the skull. More? Ellie slit deeper, slicing her wrist until her vision sparkled. The blood spattered the bones, painting them crimson. The earth began to hum. "Now what?" she gasped. "Feed us the poison flower." From her satchel, she drew the crushed belladonna she'd stolen from Morwenna's garden. She mixed it with ashes from the furnace and her own blood, swirling it in the hollow of her hand until it frothed black. She hesitated. The scent made her dizzy. "Drink." She swallowed it. The world folded inward. When her eyes opened, the grave was burning, but without smoke. A ring of invisible fire circled her, its light cold and colorless. Within the flames, the bones began to move. They coiled and reshaped, glowing faintly as they reassembled in patterns too deliberate for chance. Beatrice's voice rose from the ashes, thin and distant. "We never left." The ground split. Heat surged upward like a breath from the deep. Ellie screamed, though she couldn't tell whether it was pain or ecstasy. Her blood shimmered in midair, forming patterns that spun around her like ribbons of molten glass. The dragon's eye burned open beneath her skin. "You are the hollow. You are the vessel. We are the flame." Her body arched, every bone singing. The light seared her vision until she saw only white, and then, through the white, a shape, wings, vast and smoking, unfurling behind her. The Ashen had awakened. The next memory came in fragments. A house collapsing under a sea of fire. An old man's voice, Reggie Ashford, shouting her name. The taste of smoke in her throat as she laughed, or cried, or both. She saw him through the haze, framed by the burning remains of his cottage. His hair was white, his face streaked with soot and disbelief. "Ellie," he rasped. "Dear God, what have you done?" Her voice was no longer hers. It rolled like thunder, layered and vast. "Returned what was promised." She raised her hand, and the air rippled. Fire crawled up the walls like liquid gold. Reggie stumbled backward, eyes wide with horror. "You're not her. Not anymore." He tried to run. The floor buckled, wood turning to coal beneath his boots. The flames rose, silent, perfect, devouring. When they touched him, they didn't burn. They erased. For a heartbeat, he was a shadow against the fire, reaching toward her. Then nothing but ash remained, swirling upward into the smoke. Outside, the moors caught light. The wind carried it, first to the barns, then the fields. The sky turned red-black. The entire valley became a furnace, the kind that forges gods or destroys them. Ellie stood in the center of it, hair streaming like a banner of fire. Beatrice's laughter twined with her own. "They will remember our warmth." The Ashen's wings unfolded fully now, their edges made of smoke and memory. The creature towered above her, a serpent of ember scales and molten eyes, rising from her shadow. She reached toward it. "Take me." "You are already taken." The wind screamed. The ground split. For one eternal second, every light in Blackthorn Hollow flared white. Then silence. When the fire finally died, it did so without smoke. The rain came down in sheets that hissed where they met the hot earth. By morning, the moors were nothing but ash. 47 names would be written into the parish records. Not one body recovered intact. In the center of it all lay Elara Blackthorne, alive, barely. Her skin was grey, cracked, her eyes milk-white. She coughed, and ash spilled from her mouth instead of blood. The mark on her wrist was gone. In its place was a perfect circle of burnt skin. She looked upward. The fog was returning, curling over the dead fields like breath over glass. For a moment, she saw a shape moving through it. A dragon's face vast and hollow, its eyes like suns behind smoke. "Down here, little Ember," it whispered. "There is always room for another flame." She tried to scream, but only cinders left her lips. The ground shuddered once more, and then she was gone. By dusk, a single firefly drifted over the ruins. Its light was faint, pulsing weakly in the dark. It circled the cracked stone where the girl had fallen, then vanished into the fog. In the distance, thunder rolled again, soft, deliberate, like something breathing beneath the moors. And in the ashes, a heartbeat flickered. Once. Twice. The flame beneath the ashes had not gone out.